Hello again. I'm back with another little video update in relation to school provision for children with special educational additional needs and disabilities. So I made a little video 2 days ago on January the 5th, once we'd just heard that schools would definitely be closing, with some information about the legal framework. And quite a number of people got back in touch with me with comments or questions, or just to tell me about their experiences so far with school. So there's been a couple of little updates since then and a couple of little other points I thought would be useful to cover. So the first one being just a reminder that any changes that were made to the law in relation to children with additional needs last year have now elapsed. So the local authority and clinical commissioning groups now have an absolute duty to secure provision that has been specified in an education, health and care plan. So that is a legally binding document. So if you have an education, health and care plan for your child, there is an absolute duty for that to be provided. That duty falls to the local authority and the clinical commissioning group. So that's worth bearing in mind. That being said, a number of people contacted me to say that their child has been offered a place at school, but they don't wish their child to take up that place. So in the meantime, Claire Kershaw, who heads up this field at Essex County Council, has sent out a letter, and hopefully all parents and carers will have seen this letter by now, whereby she's saying that there is provision for every child with an education, health and care plan, and for obviously those parents who are critical workers, who are needed to go back to work. But what she's saying in the letter is, if it's possible for you to keep your child at home, then please do that. Obviously, what we know is that children are low risk. They are at low risk of getting COVID and being very unwell with it. But actually, the aim of closing schools is much more about reducing the transmission amongst the population, so amongst the adults that come into contact with those children. So for that reason, it seems perfectly reasonable and sensible to say that if you can keep your child at home and you're happy to do so, then please do so. But actually, the part that I'm really focused on is trying to make sure that we don't have a repeat of what happened last year, which is where children with special educational needs and disabilities were the ones who were the most negatively impacted. And this has been shown through the Ofsted recent inspection that this group of pupils are the ones who are the most negatively impacted by the COVID restrictions last year and school closures. So obviously I'm particularly keen to make sure that parents you all have the knowledge that you need to be able to make the right decision for you and for your family. I just wanted to tell you as well that the SEND guidance states that schools should work collaboratively with families, putting in place reasonable adjustments as necessary so pupils with SEND can successfully access remote education alongside their peers. So actually what this will mean is that where children are going to school, that schools will need to think about bespoke and creative ways to support children with special educational needs remotely. So that's something that's worth parents knowing, that is guidance that's stated for schools to be able to make the right kind of provision for your child. So obviously places are being offered to critical workers and vulnerable children. So this is something else I just wanted to look at a little bit more in detail, is the government have published their guidance about children of critical workers and vulnerable children who can access schools or educational settings. And this has been updated this week. So on Tuesday, the government updated this from the version that was available last year. And I think this is interesting because there have been some slight changes here. I thought that the last guidance was a little bit more vague because it said this group of children may include these children or that children. This one is much more specific. So it says that vulnerable children and young people include those who are assessed as being in need under Section 17 of the Children Act 1989, including children and young people who have a child in need plan, child protection plan, who are looked after, children who have an education, health and care plan, who have been identified otherwise as vulnerable by educational providers or local authorities. And there's a long list of what that might mean: children who are young carers, or difficulty engaging with remote education at home, children on the edge of receiving support from social care. So there's a list within this government guidance, and I'll put the link in below this video to this document from the government website. But it refers to the Children's Act of 1989, and I thought that was worth looking at too, because it says that in the government guidance, the recent government guidance, children are assessed as being in need under Section 17 of the Children's Act, who are on a child in need plan, child protection, looked after, or who have an education, health and care plan. But actually the guidance is much more specific in the 1989 Children's Act. So this says, for the purposes of this definition, a child should be taken to be in need if they are unlikely to achieve a reasonable standard of health or development without the provision of services by a local authority. Their health or development is likely to be significantly impaired or further impaired without the provision for them of such services if they are disabled. And it also goes on to say a child is considered disabled, and this is the terminology written within the Act, if they are blind, deaf, dumb, or suffer from a mental disorder of any kind, or is substantially and permanently handicapped by illness, injury, congenital deformity or other such disability. And then it goes on to say development means physical, intellectual, emotional, social or behavioural development, and health means physical and mental health. So I wanted to share that because if you are finding that you really need your child to go to school, you really believe that it's in their best interests, and you want to make a case for that, it's important to know those pieces of legislation, because this government new guidance about what defines a vulnerable child is much more woolly than that, and it makes it look very much as if the decisions about who are offered school places is down to a conversation between the local authority and the schools. Obviously, what we want all to see happening, and I know that schools will want this too, is to be working collaboratively with families. And that might mean that in order to make an assessment about what's the best choice for a child, they might decide to undertake a risk assessment. This is perfectly normal practice. And what this means is that the education provider, the school, will be looking at what are the risks and benefits of the child being in school and what are the risks and benefits of the child staying at home. And then it's a means of collecting all of the evidence to make the best informed decision about which way is the best way forward for the child. So it's important for you to know that. You can bear that in mind. I'll put links to all of these various bits of information in the comments section below. And just a reminder that if you want to talk to me, to Terry from Families in Focus, or any of the Culture to Parent support team for advice to share your stories, then do join us on Monday evening when we're holding a virtual coffee evening, and you'll have the opportunity to log on for free to talk to any of us and get advice about your child and your situation. Okay folks, hope this helps, and do keep in touch with me again. Keep letting me know what's happening for you with your child's school placement, what decisions you're making and why, and hopefully everybody soon will get to a position where they feel as happy as they possibly can with what's being offered under the circumstances. Take care.